This story started from the moment the girl was riding in the carriage. Now she's really on her own. She is called the unhappy bride, because the man to whom she binds herself in marriage has been dubbed Hades, the god of death. He is the son of the Empire, in a halo of eternal glory, emperor of Rofer's Cathar Esperion. As for the reason this wedding was about to take place, she wouldn't have participated at all if it weren't for the damn alcohol. It wasn't the girl's fault that he was an idiot. She didn't understand if it was normal for a 30-year-old man to have no idea where the sun rose from. Andera Hill was the western part of the imperial palace. The girl didn't understand why the sunrise should be visible from there, when to the east was the tallest building on the entire continent. She wondered if he might have in his possession some sort of magic dust, with which he could change the place of sunrise at the dictates of his hand. The reason the girl is now getting drunk is because she's been dumped by her fiancé, who hasn't seen her in 10 years, all because of her know-it-all behavior. She mentioned that the sun rises in the east, that's all, and he broke off their engagement. She asked the boy if it was something even the emperor couldn't do. The boy hesitated and replied, "Which is correct." But at that moment, the girl didn't realize how long the subject had been sitting next to her. That surprised her. When she pulled away from her drink, he was already sitting across from her. She thought she was a bad person. He didn't seem like it, but anything could be. At this point, the stranger decided to share his food with her, saying she could eat it. The girl was surprised and thought that if he gave her some food, it must be good. Well, at least he's better than her ex-fiancé, the chump. The girl tells him that she's dying to go back to the academy. But that's not an option because she's already gotten her doctorate. She doesn't want to date another husband candidate, not get married, not deal with another idiot in general. Guy asked, "Will she really be looking for another potential spouse candidate?" The girl said that she doesn't digest ugly and old men. They are the worst. And if she does have to get married, she would like her spouse to be smart and good-looking, although he doesn't have to be of the same caliber as Yodel. The man didn't understand who she was talking about, so the girl said he was smart and attractive, and at that moment, she thought that she couldn't see his face because he was wearing a hood. But the girl conceived that this man might even be okay, and she liked his voice. The guy asked if the girl was okay. He thought she was too drunk. The amber-colored eyes are quite beautiful. She figured she'd have to find an attractive man next time, but she shouldn't be too picky. She still hoped, however, that he would at least be nice enough. At this point she collapsed on the table and started to fall asleep a little. The guy was alarmed. He said that there was no need to sleep here. She replied that there was no difference. She was tired, so she would sleep wherever she wanted. And if they can have a drink together once in a while, it'll be great. Yeah, I'd love it if her future husband looked like that man. The stranger asked if the girl was okay. At that moment she thought there was a perfect candidate standing right in front of her. She thought he was probably nice and good-looking. Not a bad listener either. At that moment she intercepted his hand. When someone introduces me, they ask me, "What does she do?" The girl did not listen to him and asked if he was married. The man was shocked. He did not understand the essence of the question. Then she asked if he was engaged, or if he had a woman he loved. But the boy looked at her and said he had no one. She said that was fine. Then it goes just perfect, and told him to get them married. The guy was shocked. He didn't even know what to say. But the girl kept repeating that she was asking him to marry her. At that moment he turned away from her, and then the girl asked him if he didn't want to. But he replied that it was not that. The man asked if the man's status or his family didn't matter to her. The girl was surprised and asked why she should care about status. I thought to myself that this pub was usually frequented only by disguised nobles who wanted to party in secret. But on the other hand, there's no statement saying only for creation drinks in this establishment. There are expensive ones here, but that's about it. Then she asked if he was a commoner. When the man heard that, he looked down a little. She wondered if she had hurt his pride, but when he didn't say anything, she said it was okay. She already had the title anyway, and asked who cared if he was a commoner or not. By marrying, he could just enter her family. She said that she was the only child in the family, so she needed to get married quickly and have an heir. The man was surprised and asked what kind of heir, but the girl did not hear him, and continued by saying that this jerk, or rather, her ex-fiancé, is not only stupid, but also looks like a carp. On top of that, he is also bald. Children inherit their parents' traits, whether they want to or not. And as much as she'd get out of her skin in me, and a bigger carp like him can only give birth to smaller carp. Her parents may not accept the man at first, but they should see his face. So they will surely recognize that she has made the best choice possible. Well, the man didn't answer, so she thought it was probably not going to work out after all. She'd have to keep meeting more of the nobility. She looked at another glass of alcohol, and thought that a good option for her would be to drink herself to death. When she started to drink from the glass, the man told her to stop. After finishing her drink, she said she felt great now, and could go home after all. She would be meeting the cardinals for husbands. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and all other kinds of tomorrow. When they left the place, the girl laughed and said that she was going to go home and lie down. The guy followed her and told her to wait in case she ran into dangerous people on the way back. The girl looked at him contemptuously and replied to shut him up because she does what she wants. She then took him by his clothes and told him that he was the concealer of his own face, here the most suspicious, and asked if it was clear to him. I wondered why he was hiding his face like that. He's so handsome, fantastic, straight up, and also 10 times better than Yodel. When the guy started to answer her something and she couldn't hear him anymore, she was so sleepy. At that moment, when the girl wanted to say something to him, she could not finish the sentence and passed out. The next morning a maid came into the girl's room and asked Lady Ellie if she was awake at last. "Open up, what's early?" I asked. "How many stages did you drink last night?" The girl woke up and said her head hurt, straight up splitting. When she sat down on the bed, she asked how much was needed. She drank just a little, maybe 5 cups. The girl was very hungover. She said she felt like she had to remember something, but she didn't know what. The maid gave the girl water and honey and said she would like to see the bill to see if she was lying or not. Ellie was surprised and asked her why he hadn't been kicked out like that. She wondered how she had even gotten home yesterday. The maid asked if she didn't remember. She had been brought to the palace by one of the beer hall workers. She said it was good. She also said that he came in through the back door, so that she couldn't be seen by the countess. The maid also said it was good to see that at least her wig hadn't fallen off on the way home. After a while, the girl cleaned herself up and was on her way somewhere. Sitting in the wagon, she thought it was no wonder they asked beer hall guests to write their names down, just in case they had to deal with drunken customers like her. She didn't understand why they hadn't billed her. She had made such a mess that the full cost of the damage had not yet been calculated. The fact that she couldn't remember anything made it all the more frightening. The girl thought that she should just forget about it. But then she realized that there was nothing to forget, because she had virtually 0 memories. She thought that if she had done something wrong, she would soon find out about it. She got out of the wagon and was met by a girl named Lorraine. She said hello to Ellie. The two of them were happy to see each other. Ellie gave the girl a gift for inviting her. When she saw her, she said, "Did Ellie really belong so much at tonight's event?" Lorraine asked. "Though what about? That's her way of saying it after all. She was the one who had a hand in organizing it." Ellie thought that she'd actually drunk herself into a stupor last night. When the event began, Lorraine asked what had happened between her and Count Vegeta. The girl said he broke off their engagement. Lorraine asked if that was it, or if something had happened. Ellie said they hadn't seen each other in 10 years. Nothing happened. They just weren't right for each other, so they decided to split up. Ellie said that the offer that came from the Count. But he suddenly looked at her friend, she thought, under the gaze of Lorraine. Then she thought the worst and asked. She thought the worst, and asked if Count Vegeta was telling everyone bad things about me. Lorraine asked her friend if she knew that the Count had a complex about his lack of intelligence. The girl said that the Count's family worked in trade, so all the members spoke at least 3 languages, but the Count failed the foreign language test 3 times. So she's currently the head of the family business, his younger cousin. There were also rumors that he was engaged to take advantage of her intellect, yet information about her as the youngest freshman at the academy, who had won first place in her class in terms of points, was even printed in the newspapers. Ellie asked, "Then why did the Earl break off the engagement?" He said that the sunrise that could be seen in the west from Andere Hill was breathtaking. She only replied that the sun rises in the east, and he left her because of that. Lorraine said it sounded like she was trying her best to indulge him. Ellie said she'd been quiet for as long as she could, whatever nonsense he was saying. Her friend said that maybe the Count needed a smart woman who would still obey him. Ellie got angry and asked, "Where in the whole world would there be such a woman?" Lorraine the girl was so not angry, maybe this idiot. But then suddenly she stopped talking and said what she wanted to say. Count Vegeta and spreading all sorts of rumors about her. But the residents of the capital are much more interested in a different topic. Ellie asked, "And what is it?" Lorraine said that the Emperor had announced his imminent wedding. Ellie was very surprised that the Emperor was getting married, because up until now he had been single. Ellie thought that, on the other hand, it was none of her business, and she had enough problems of her own. The girl came home quickly, and when the maid saw her, she said she was early enough. The girl explained that the hostess was busy, and she didn't know anyone else there. She thought that if she had stayed a minute longer, she would have turned all the tables upside down. When Ellie sat down at the table, the maid brought her a newspaper, and she asked if it was the latest issue. The maid said yes. After that, she thanked her and said that if she needed anything, she would call the maid. When the door closed, Ellie began to read the newspaper. Who is not the unlucky bride trapped in the net of Hades? 7 years after his accession to the throne, the Emperor finally announced his marriage. For what reason could a cruel ruler make such an unusual announcement? The identity of the unlucky bride. It has yet to be established. The girl thought it all sounded like marrying the Emperor was a nightmare in reality. She didn't know if it was normal for a newspaper to write this kind of article. Ellie doesn't know who his fiancée is, but she sympathizes with her. Suddenly the girl read the headline. However, not so long ago, the Emperor was seen in the company of a woman with whom he spent time in secret. It seems that no other people have been seen in the Emperor's company since then, and as a consequence, that lady is most likely his future bride. Although her face can't be seen, the lady is known to have long pink hair with tips a shade of light blue sky. Ellie got a little nervous and thought that it was her hair color. The moment she dyed her hair, she said that they say it's fashionable to dye it 2 colors nowadays, so she decided to try it for fun. Ellie, after reading all this, was very angry, so she threw the paper on the table and started hitting it. When she calmed down a little, she laughed nervously. The girl thought maybe her eyesight had gone drastically wrong, seeing words that shouldn't be there at all. She thought she needed to pull herself together. Most likely she still hadn't sobered up. After the engagement broke up, she was angry and simply put on a wig. Before she left, she thought she might be wrong about the color of her hair. So she went to the bed and pulled out a small chest. Before she opened it, she thought there was no way her maid Jerry would have dyed her wig in such bright colors. She really hoped she was right now. But when the girl opened the trunk, she saw a wig with the same hair color described in the newspaper, and she thought she was indeed the same lady. She vaguely remembers drinking with someone. Jerry even went to the pub and brought back a receipt that the bill had already been paid. Since Ellie hadn't visited the capital for a whole decade and didn't know anyone in it, it was probably paid for by the man who drank with her. She thought maybe it was the Emperor. Immediately she dismissed those thoughts from her mind, saying that it was impossible. Why on earth would the Emperor go drinking in a pub like this? And why would he talk to her, someone he didn't even know, over a drink? Suddenly Ellie remembered that Jerry was supposed to prepare newspaper clippings about the day the Empire was founded. She went over to the bookcases to check. Opening one of the books, she thought that it wasn't true. It just couldn't be. At that moment, the girl remembered a passage from the previous night. The man said she shouldn't fall asleep right now and asked if she could get up. Let her just try to hold on until the crew arrived. She replied that she couldn't and was very sleepy. Ellie grumbled and said she wasn't kidding when she said they should get married. She didn't care about his status or anything. She might not look it, but she was actually very smart and wealthy. The guy replied that he knew all that. Ellie was surprised and asked how, but then said that it probably didn't matter anymore. If he wanted to marry her, she promised, she would make him the happiest. At that moment, Ellie wondered what she had done. Who is the woman the Emperor has announced his marriage to? The identity of his unfortunate bride has yet to be revealed. We have done our best to investigate the matter. However, we have been unable to find any information. There are no unmarried ladies in the Empire with such bright hair and such colors. Ellie, rereading the paper, tossed it aside again and thought, of course, where would they find a woman with hair that color? She thought she was finished, with the papers all day long talking about the Emperor's wedding. She thought she'd have to face the truth. but her memories are still distorted because she was drunk at the time. But she would hardly speak to the emperor without any formalities at all, even if she was under a degree. And at that moment, the girl began to remember how casually she had chatted with the emperor, how he had prepared food for her, how she had bragged to the emperor about her status. As they stood outside, Ellie took off his hood and told him that he was much more handsome this way. She could see clearly now, and could already envision their future together. She told him that he wouldn't have to worry about the appearance of their children if they got married. She asked him if he was okay with that. But without waiting for an answer, Ellie hugged him and said that they had to get married. There was nothing to think about. He could live with her and not worry about anything. Ellie thought that she had such a good memory that she could remember everything that had happened down to the smallest detail. She thought, her long tongue be damned, she'd be executed. She doesn't have one, she thought. She should have been so not drunk. Ellie didn't understand why she had said so many things to the emperor. She's more concerned about her shameful behavior than her possible marriage to the ruler of the empire. But when you think about it, it's not her fault. In fact, she had no idea that the emperor would show up at the pub, and he could at least introduce himself to her. How was she to know? But then suddenly she thought about the contents of the article. She wondered if the news about the emperor's wedding and the search for the unlucky bride weren't two separate matters. So she went to look through the articles once more. When Ellie did so, it became apparent to her that they were just speculating about who the bride might be since her identity was unknown to anyone. The emperor had only announced the imminent wedding. Looking at his picture again, the girl thought he was really handsome. Some men must have the same fear of getting married as women. So Ellie thought maybe that was the reason why, that night, the emperor decided to unwind, and he was not lucky enough to run into her. She clutched the paper and thought that her worries were probably unfounded. That's why you can't be influenced by the press, because it makes you jump to all sorts of ridiculous conclusions. She had certainly heard that the emperor was a rather peculiar individual, no longer crazy enough to marry a drunken woman who had only met him one single time. Ellie decided that she would write a letter to the academy, stating that she had accepted the professorship offered to her, the same one she had previously turned down. She would inform them that she had decided to dedicate her life to research and the academy. Now never again will she have to meet other people who are like the carps, representatives of the nobility who behave like gnarled leeches. She's already envisioning her bright future. Somewhere out there in the depths of the backwoods, there's an academy waiting for her. But suddenly a woman came into her room and asked if Ellie was there. The girl, seeing who had entered, asked her mother if something was wrong. The mother asked what she was doing here and why it was such a mess. Did she take her anger out on those poor newspapers? Ellie, who was holding the paper, casually started tearing up next and asked what she was even talking about. The girl then threw away the rest of the paper and asked what had brought her mother here. The woman said that she had received such wonderful news that she couldn't help but rush to her at once. She pulled out a letter and said that this year His Majesty had invited all the unmarried ladies of the Empire to a coming-of-age ball. Ellie was surprised and said that they had never had a ball at the palace on that day before. Then she opened the letter and read, "All unmarried ladies of the Empire are obliged to attend." The girl wondered why that sounded like a warning. She didn't understand why the Emperor was holding this year's ball with a mandatory attendance requirement. Suddenly her mother spoke again, saying that she was alarmed at the breakup of her engagement, but that this event might be a good opportunity for her. She'd find a better groom than that pot-bellied Earl. Ellie thought that she had brought up the subject of her marriage again after only a few days. The girl said that Ellie was smart and pretty, so she would definitely get people's attention. Her mom offered to buy her a new dress exquisite enough to help draw the eyes of others to her. She asked if they could go shopping tomorrow. It's not that Ellie doesn't want to get married at all. It's just that she disliked fools. For a woman to have discretion, her husband must be capable with a man. After thinking it over, Ellie smiled and said that of course they would go. She thought to herself that the world didn't believe that Ellie could manage on her own. When it was evening in the Emperor's castle, loud cries of pain came from the basement. The boy was covered in blood and said he didn't understand why he was doing this to him. He asked why he deserved such cruel treatment. He asked for His Highness to answer. The man in black smiled and asked if he wanted to know the justification for killing him. He said since they were talking about it, he had something to ask about too, like the documents in the safe in his room. People like him learn nothing when there is suspicion that a plan will fall apart. Evidence should be burned, His Highness told him. He walked over to the guy and said, did he really need any excuse to squash a bug that was getting on his nerves? He's a complete fool who caused the Emperor to have to kneel down and complain even if you end up getting killed, isn't that right? The man asked. The guy, who was feeling a lot of pain, asked him to enlarge to have mercy on him, to take pity on him. After all that happened, the man asked his assistant to air anything that seemed suspicious. Everything an inn should be on the second floor. He wants it immediately brought directly to him. He also asked that the relatives whose blood runs in his blood, every last one of them, including any illegitimate children, be dropped off. They, too, must be executed. But his aide said that perhaps some conservative nobles would oppose these actions. The Emperor was very much surprised and said, how is it so against? At present, the supreme power in this country is concentrated in his hands as Emperor. Anyone who steps against him will be considered a traitor. Anyone who raises a protest must be eliminated. They can find replacements for them. His aide said everything would be as His Highness wished. The Emperor told him to remember that there should be no exceptions, and anyone with a drop of this criminal's blood in them must disappear from the face of the earth. You never know if any of them will try to use their bloodline as an excuse to rebel against the Emperor. Afterward, the Emperor returned to his office. The workers greeted him, one of them saying that his outfit for the ball was almost ready. However, they had heard that the hair of the young lady, the future empress, was quite bright, so the tailors had difficulty in selecting the color of clothes for her. Said they must have read that yellow paper that publishes a laughable statement, under the pretense of informing the public, because the lady is blonde. The next morning, Ellie was brought several dress options. Jerry asked her what she thought of that style of dress, but she said she didn't like it. It was too fancy. Then she showed her the bright pink dress and asked her how she liked it. Ellie said she couldn't seem to see anything. She must have been blinded by the dress because it sparkled so much. Jerry was infuriated by this, and she said that a girl can't simply reject all options. Some choice has to be made. Ellie replied that she knew, but the dresses she had seen were a little over the top. Jerry said that everyone was wearing clothes like that now, and she's here with the Countess, then would have bought one of the outfits shown by now. Ellie thought it had cost her a lot of work to convince her not to come, almost as much as it had when she had to defend her dissertation. But she'd agreed. Then all of a sudden Jerry said she had an idea and asked if she liked numbers. Ellie said that was a rather unexpected question, but she explained that she suggested using the elimination method, removing all the dresses she didn't like the most, and then making a choice from what was left. Ellie thought it was only fair because she would have to pick out a dress and purchase it anyway. She wanted an outfit with the least amount of ribbons and embellishments, and asked if she could find one. But she thought that if she gave up all the dresses she didn't like, there would be nothing left. There must be one she could wear. She just had to choose. As she walked around the store some more, she saw a black dress and said it was perfect. It fit her, so she wanted to buy it. Jerry explained that it was a morning dress. Ellie said that she realized that there was some truth in what her mother said, but she didn't want to stand out at this ball. Eventually she would start looking for a husband again. The girl said she would indeed find one. Jerry took her hands and told her that she would let it pass, but only once. Now she would find some dresses, and she would pick one out of them, Jerry asked as the girl took a seat, and she would go and look at the boutique. Ellie wanted to say something else, but thought it was time to stop whining and have something to choose from. As the girl walked through the departments, she thought it was inevitable anyway, so she should take a look around too. When she passed by one of the departments, she saw some girls discussing something. One of them said that she was surprised by the Emperor's decision to have a ball on her coming-of-age day. The second girl said that she was also surprised, and she didn't understand what His Majesty was thinking. She said that the Emperor wanted all the unmarried ladies of the capital. The girl said that then all the unmarried men would show up, so there would be a lot of people gathered. Ellie thought she could only hear talk of the ball, but it was understandable. It seemed strange even to someone like her who knew little about high society. The girls kept talking. They say he's getting ready to get married, although no one still knows who the bride is. It scares me to make such a sudden decision. I hope everything goes well. Ellie that there is an event coming up at the Imperial Palace, but they don't seem to be excited about it. She overhears one of the ladies say that she hopes there will be no bloodshed this time. Baron Fessel was murdered last spring. His fiancée was so shocked that she left the capital and returned to the village to calm down and rest. The girl asked why they thought His Majesty had killed the Baron. Ellie was surprised that the Emperor had suddenly killed someone at a social gathering. The girl said that maybe he had said something he didn't like. Still, it's happened before. He even got rid of the nanny who had taken care of him since he was a baby, said the other girl. Ellie was in shock. She didn't understand what they were even saying. Why be careful? Citizens of the Empire are obliged to honor and serve their emperor, but still be able to raise objections if they decided to execute people without trial. Ellie wondered if no one would dare to oppose him. Apparently she has a problem after all. But at that moment Jerry came up to her and asked her what she was doing there. The girl feared that she had run away and was hiding behind a column. Ellie said that was ridiculous. Why would she run away, and asked if she'd picked out dresses yet. Jerry said she'd talked to a tailor who said she'd be willing to make her a custom dress. So I thought I'd ask her if that was an option. Allie said it was just what she needed, and he'd better go to her immediately to discuss it. Jerry didn't understand why there was such a rush. The girls continued their conversation. Who is this new empress? All the noble women I know are lost in conjecture. Could it have remained that it is the foreign lady, as the same newspapers assert? Even if we find out who she is, it won't change anything. I don't envy her at all. But the emperor said he would never marry. I wonder what changed his mind. Well, personally, I'm curious how long she'd be able to live under the same roof with him. Ellie figured she'd spent half her life in the neutral territory that is the academy, so she's not exactly a patriot. But she's a scientist after all, and scientists, go crazy if they can't find out details about the object of their curiosity. So when she got home in the evening, she set out to learn more about the emperor. She picked up various books and articles about him. The current emperor was originally the third prince and the son of the previous emperor by his second wife, so he didn't really stand out. Well, already at the age of 15 he became a knight, and rose to the position of captain solely because of his abilities. He even crushed the demons in the Kural Mountains using only his brute strength, although it was commonly believed that it was impossible to defeat them. After successfully killing the demons, he completed the map of the Western Mountains and returned to the capital. Ellie felt like she was reading a heroic novel. Everyone was talking about this demon extermination expedition in the Western Mountains, even during her time at the academy, and she had no idea that the current emperor was the captain of the knights back then. Ellie wondered, is he even human? It seemed to her that he belonged to an entirely different species. It was nothing strange that with some accomplishments, he had become a promising contender for the throne. But before his accession to the throne, many suspicious things happened. A year after the current emperor returned from an expedition, the crown prince died as a result of a fall from his horse. And the following year, during an accident with a carriage, the second prince also dies. Having lost 2 sons, the empress moved to a mansion in the south, where she died of illness. How it was that so many members of the imperial family had died in 5 years, and this in the presence of guards and close surveillance, Ellie did not understand. Everyone knows that the current emperor has only benefited from all these deaths. Perhaps this is the reason why the nobles continue to pay lip service even when he acts recklessly. They fear being next. Who will die by his sword, because he's a tyrant who doesn't hesitate to kill people? Ellie thought that no, it wasn't so strange that he had executed someone in public, but there was no way a truly ruthless tyrant would allow a drunken woman to behave like that to him. Ellie was in shock as to why she'd done all this, and it was all because of him, that bloody carp. If he was at least handsome, she could still try to beat the crap out of him. If only she hadn't gone out drinking because of that bastard, then she wouldn't have gotten drunk and hit on the emperor. But when you think about it that way, isn't it an honor to have a mug from another with the emperor? Ellie's brain is already refusing to work, and she makes up all sorts of excuses. The girl decided that she would just keep a low profile at the ball and leave without attracting any attention. Even though she was wearing a wig, the emperor would still have no trouble recognizing her if he was perceptive enough. Still, he's gone from third prince to the current head of state. The emperor must be maintaining his image as a tyrant by stealth. She thought, would he have otherwise let the newspapers write false articles about him? She called him Hades. They would have lost any opportunity to criticize him at all. since all critics would have been executed long ago. He's sensible enough and has a lot more power than Ellie. This could be a dangerous situation, so she'd better not do anything. At night, the Emperor, sitting in his room, thought. Wedding rings are worn on the ring finger of the left hand. Oh, this is a first for me. If he had known he could bind her to him forever with a simple ring, he would have used it long ago. The next day, Jerry was braiding Ellie's hair and asked, "Shall I do your hair to her liking?" The girl replied that she could do as she saw fit. Jerry said that when she saw such a large degree of her involvement in the boutique, she was incredibly relieved. Modiste Madame Rousseau was also inspired by her request. Ellie asked that day that they keep the ribbons and ruffles to a minimum and let the dress reflect less. Jerry said she must be tired of all the ribbons and ruffles herself. The maid said that Ellie now looked more mature than usual. At this point, the girl thought she didn't like where this was going and asked, "Seriously? Doesn't she look more attractive than usual?" Jerry got a little embarrassed and asked again, then said it was the first time she'd ever heard that kind of joke from her. When Ellie arrived at the event, she was greeted by Lorraine and told she was wonderful, and some even say that Madame Rousseau was inspired by her request. The girl said she should dress like this more often. Tonight she would surely stand out among all those single ladies. Ellie thanked her friend for the compliment, and thought she'd asked for a dress with minimal jewelry so she wouldn't stand out, but that only inspired the dressmaker to improve the dress. Ellie looked around and said there were more people than expected. She asked, "Are there so many unmarried aristocrats in their empire?" Lorraine said that after all, the invitation said that all unmarried ladies were required to attend, and she and her fiancé were still engaged and not yet married. So technically, she was included. The girl said that considering all the engaged ladies and groomsmen, the large number of guests was understandable. Ellie said that it made sense then. Lorraine said she would have loved to chat longer, but she had to go greet the other engaged couples. Ellie replied that she would not detain her any longer. If she was so busy, let her go, and also thanked her fiancé for escorting her here. But Lorraine said no thanks. They were friends after all. She hoped the girl would meet a dazzling man tonight. Ellie thought she was such a good friend. But unfortunately, she doesn't want to dazzle herself just yet, because she plans to stay as inconspicuous as possible. The girl thought she couldn't leave until the Emperor showed up. People whisper about what a tyrant he is and all that, but when he shows up, everyone will gather to get a closer look at him. Ellie even found a way out in advance, so it's just a matter of waiting a little longer. She thinks it's better to drink a little, then there will be an excuse to go outside for some fresh air. When the girl took herself a glass of champagne, she thought it tasted great. She wondered where the Imperial Palace bought alcohol, but then suddenly her musings were interrupted by a voice that said, "Attention, honored guests, the son of the Empire is in a halo of eternal glory." Emperor Rofer's Qatar Esperian arrived, and at that moment, the Emperor walked into the banquet hall. Ellie, upon seeing him, wondered, what did it mean to be the victim of her drunken antics? It was indeed the Emperor. The girl still has to face the truth. It seems that it is not so easy to get to him, although his images in the newspapers gave a somewhat different impression. But the girl thought it was quite expected. She still didn't understand how she could get drunk and propose to such a man. She wondered if maybe she should write, and then a dissertation on the subject. She looked at the Emperor again, and didn't understand why someone like him would have a ball on his coming-of-age day. Ellie has no idea what the Emperor is thinking, so she would like to hear his explanation. At that moment, the man waved his hand, and immediately the music began to play. Ellie was very surprised that the ball had started, even though the Emperor hadn't even said a word. She wondered, did these people not care about me at all? For what reason could they have been gathered? The girl thought that this event was being held at the expense of the taxes collected. She didn't understand that no one cared about the fate of the imperial treasury. As Ellie suspected, it would be difficult for her to be her own person here. She was not a fan of such events, and it was arrogant of her to think that she could stand out from the other guests. She looked at one of the guests and thought that this lady's necklace alone was already more conspicuous than she was. Everyone else was dressed like a wedding too. The girl looked at the Emperor and thought he didn't look interested at all. She looked closely and wondered if he was asleep. Ellie decides that now she needs to slowly get out of there. She doesn't know what the cameraman is thinking, but it's none of her business. The girl looked at the banquet table and thought that if she was here, she had one last thing to do before she left. Ellie decided to have another glass of this wine. It tasted divine. She wondered if she asked what kind of wine it was, the servants would tell her. She wondered if it was expensive. She took another drink, and thought she would have to ask after all. The Emperor was watching her at that moment. He was glad that the drink appeared to be to her liking. Too much to drink. Better not. So maybe he should go and stop her. When Ellie emptied the account, she thought that after this, all the hardships she had endured for the sake of being dressed up that day could be let go. I'd like a drink. But she thought it best not to. Just a few days ago she had already gotten so drunk. The girl thought it was safe to go home now. But then suddenly she heard that it was a conversation. Oh my goodness. I guess I'll have to tell you the story of this piece of jewelry after all. Ellie thought that voice was unique in its ability to send goosebumps all over her body, belonging to the fool who dared to leave her, to the one who would actually find her not so long ago, to get her drunk. That emerald necklace he brought me into the country so long ago. That's exactly the same Vegeta carp. One of the guests said that apparently the Count had a knack for this sort of thing. Vegeta said of course, and they would be amazed. To name his price, Ellie thought. An ugly, annoying face. Oh well, nothing new really. She looked next to her and saw a fairly young girl. She thought maybe it was his fiancée. She looked very young, just reaching adulthood. She wondered if Vegeta had lost his mind. Ellie didn't understand why on earth he was showing off that piece of jewelry. She was washing. With jewelry. But even she could see that it was tasteless. She doesn't understand why all these people are trying to praise him. And then she remembers that the Vegeta family is quite wealthy. And it all makes sense. She can't believe she had to watch his stupid face again. How annoying he is. Well, of all the places to talk non-stop, this is the one he chose. He'd been nothing more than a nuisance in Ellie's life from beginning to end. So she decided she needed to leave quickly while he fluffed his feathers. At this moment, Vegeta looked toward the girl and thought that blonde hair was quite familiar to him. When he saw the girl's face, he thought it was the same smug girl who had humiliated him. She thinks she's all-powerful just because she's a little educated. And then suddenly the girl heard this voice. Oh my God, it's the brilliant Lady Ellie. Where are you going? The ball just started. He said that way one might think, inadvertently, that she was trying to escape, or he was wrong. Ellie laughed and greeted Count Vegeta, and asked why she would take offense from the palace of the safest place in the entire capital. At that moment, the girl thought that apparently the only part of his head that functioned normally was his eyes. She wasn't happy that he recognized her at all. Ellie had been labeled a gifted child from a very young age. The mana circulations, invisible to the human eye, were more interesting to her than teddy bears. While reading books, she had no difficulty understanding the theories contained in them. On her birthday, she always asked to be given books. The girl was the only child in the family, so she usually got everything she wanted from her parents. Everyone around her was shocked when a 10-year-old girl was accepted into the Manga Academy, and she was top of her class. And this school is notoriously difficult to get into, even for most scientists. While everyone around them was discussing, Ellie's parents quickly and quietly betrothed her to the Earl before her academy studies began. Ellie walked up to her mom and asked why she needed to address her before school started. She doesn't like that Earl after all. He's ugly, old, stupid. Mom replied that she understood that she was upset. She doesn't like him very much either. The girl asked then, maybe this engagement is not necessary and at all. But her mother said not to grow up and start dreaming more. And the Count's family is rich, and it will be able to support her aspiration. Her mother said the world refuses to recognize women's abilities, and she hopes the Count will change for the better over the years. At that point, the parents made the best decision possible. Earl asked, didn't she have anyone accompanying her to the event? So she hid in a corner. They just didn't know that this man would never change for the better. Vegeta said it was rather sad to see his former fiancée in that position, and laughed. Ellie didn't understand what he thought she should respond to that. She didn't care if she was saddened or not. The girl replied that she understood, but there was no need for him to worry about her. When Ellie wanted to leave again, the Count took the girl who was standing next to him and asked if she could see that sparkling necklace. He asked her if she was offended, probably because she could have been hers. Ellie apologized and said, what does that have to do with it? And thought to herself, this idiot. I can't believe he's trying to start a fight. The Count told her not to act like a great and powerful know-it-all. He could shower her with jewels, whatever she wanted. Ellie, what about their conversation has gotten everyone's attention? Doesn't he care about embarrassing his own fiancée? Apparently the Count hoped to see the girl feel regret. But that's us for sure. Not to be. So she said that she figured he could now give gifts to his new bride, so she wished them a good evening. The Count said he felt sorry for the Count and Countess. They had high hopes for their only daughter. He knows they wanted to marry her off to a man from a good family, and that's why they organized her engagement 10 years ago. But she rejected as the fates, and what she only thought parents send their daughter to the academy. Whatever a woman learns after marriage, the knowledge they have gained becomes useless anyway. At that moment, Ellie remembered her mother's words, who said that she would find a better fiancé than that pudgy Earl if she looked around and realized that there were many wonderful men around. Despite the fact that the girl is already fed up with the search for a husband by the throat, the very idea of marriage does not disgust her. Only here standing in front of her eye-carp did not become better even at the very least. The only reason she put up with his mind-numbingly stupid talk was because her mom always praised her, Countess, and even as a child said she was so proud of the girl. Perhaps she doesn't realize it yet. But the cesspit is imprisoned for her benefit. She said that the higher the position, the more powerful the man she would marry, the greater the number of opportunities open to her. That reason was that her parents always made the best decisions for her. So she said she thought his parents were more disappointed than that. To look at the kind of son they had. Ellie said she wondered why they never hired a teacher to explain to him how to use his head properly. Apparently their faith in his abilities was overblown. Ellie laughed and said, or she got that way because the teacher was too smart for him to understand. The Count got angry and asked what she was talking about. Ellie told him that there was no shame in being a fool who refused to admit his shortcomings. Ellie smiled brightly and said that it might be a little late now, but she still hoped he would find a mentor he could communicate with on the same level. Vegeta got angry and asked what the hell she was saying. She's now trying to read him subsidies. Ellie explained in a calm voice that the word grants meant money donated by the government under certain conditions, and she thought he meant to say notations. Ellie said that she had no thoughts of offering him financial help, but if he appeared to truly need it, she could help. The Count got angry, stepped closer to her and asked her how she dared to talk such nonsense. She thought she was so clever that she was trying to make him laugh. Ellie thought, what a lowly man he is. He might try, but she wouldn't be intimidated by him. He could do what he wanted. She could always just leave the stupid capital for the academy. At this point, the Count raised his hand at the girl and asked, what kind of man would even want a girl like her? Ellie wondered if he was really going to hit her. What a jerk. But at that moment, a man came up to them and asked why he dared to raise his hand to her, and in his presence. Ellie opened her eyes and thought that someone had grabbed his arm and stopped him. Then she looked up and saw the Emperor right in front of her, who asked the Count if he had forgotten who ruled the ball. The Count didn't understand what he was talking about. The Emperor got angry and asked if he was serious about this. I asked him. It seems that the rumors about his shallowness were not lying. He asked who you thought you were, causing a commotion at an event he was hosting. At that moment, he kicked the Earl in the stomach. Ellie marveled at the ease with which he just picked up and kicked the Earl. The girl didn't understand what was going on. At that moment, the Emperor turned to her and asked her if she wanted him to deal with the goon. Ellie thought the Count tried to hit her and was knocked down by none other than the Emperor, Rofers. Once more he turned to the girl and asked if she could hear him. Ellie was surprised and asked what he was saying. The Emperor replied that he would ask her again if she wanted him to deal with him. Ellie didn't know what he was talking about. When she asked about it, the Emperor said he was referring to the goon he was now sitting on the floor. The girl asked how exactly he intended to deal with him. The Emperor replied that it was exactly as she had thought. It would only take 15 seconds to shut him up, though then some blood would be spilled. Ellie shouted for him not to do that. There was no need. After all, this event was supposed to be fun. Rofer said that's how it is. But anyone who doesn't know their place is best gotten rid of before they can become a nuisance. Ellie, what about the idea of killing him? He never gave up. When the Count left, the Emperor said he waited for her to come to him. But it was we fool who managed to ruin the mood earlier, also when they had so much to discuss. The girl was surprised and asked what they needed to discuss. The emperor leaned toward her and said, "She couldn't have forgotten what she did to us that night after all the noise she made. It was she who proposed after all," the emperor said and smiled at her. The checklist titled, "Who is the Emperor's Bride First?" is the location of the action, namely the imperial palace. The emperor said that since we'd made a formal offer, he thought he should observe the necessary formalities. He couldn't go to her, so he had to spend the taxpayers' money to make it happen. But unfortunately, the worthless moron aka the Count ruined it. But the emperor said his answer was yes anyway. He looked at the girl and said, "Is she drunk again?" Ellie said, "Of course not, although the alcohol was excellent." Roffers said that she must have a funny drinking habit. He suggested that she drink tea rather than chew a plate. The girl was surprised, and then saw that she was holding the plate near her mouth. Ellie now realized for sure that the fiancé who kept mentioning it was definitely her. The emperor asked if she was taking any medication, but the girl replied that she didn't, and thought to herself that the matter was bad because her brain was having a very hard time thinking. Rofer said she was very quiet today, although last night she was. The girl immediately interrupted him and apologized and asked him to give her 1 minute to think. She certainly remembered recent events, so she told him. Rofers asked if they could discuss her suggestions here. He doesn't have any objections, but apparently the girl does. Ellie just sat there silent. Then he asked if she could hear him at all. After a little silence, the girl said he was right. This place would hardly suit them. She looked at all the people watching their conversation. I wondered if she would be punished for insulting the imperial family. At that moment, Rofer said that she should follow him so that they could talk. Ellie thought, if the emperor is going to kill her. As she walked, she heard people whispering. Who is this woman? Why is he taking her away? Someone asked if that was it. That's his rumored fiancé. Another replied that the newspapers had said that she had a very unusual hair color. Ellie, while following the emperor, thought she was the woman who ruined his ball and harassed him drunkenly. She wondered, did he have the right to kill her immediately? But then she suddenly remembered that there were rumors that he killed people on the spot against the law. She doesn't know if she should just follow him. It was only after Ellie had gotten those thoughts out of her head that her brain deigned to accept the information that her marriage proposal had been accepted. She'd thought they were on their way to the execution site. The emperor said that it had been well over a minute since she had finished thinking about it. The girl replied that she had committed a heinous crime. Rofer said she mentioned laws and other boring topics, but that's not what he wants to discuss at all. Ellie started to get nervous because he was looking right at her. She wondered if that was sincerity in his eyes. The girl said she was omitting in that case to allow him to ask her a question. On a night when he was visiting a pub in disguise, a drunken aristocrat, without any manners of pride or dignity, proposed to him. The girl thought right. Even though she was drunk at the time, his beautiful eyes shone like the sun. Here it is. Ellie gathered her thoughts and said that he seemed to have accepted the offer. Rofer smiled and said that apparently their conversation was finally moving forward. Ellie blurted out that she had no idea what was going on. She told His Majesty that he probably already knows who she is and what family she comes from. Yes, she is loyal to the imperial family, but she has no talent or ambition in the realm of politics. Neither of them will get any benefit from this marriage, the girl shouted. Rofer said that first she proposed to him, then rejected his consent to that very proposal. He thinks it's all some kind of horror. Ellie says it's not that she's rejecting him. As a citizen of the Empire, she's just advising him to reconsider for the sake of their country's future. She thinks a lady from a powerful family would be more suitable to be empress. Ellie smiled and wondered if she had proposed while drunk, but she had. Even though she was drunk, she must have proposed sincerely, because she could see his beautiful face in front of her, and she thought she'd found a gold mine. But as it turns out, you chose the emperor himself to flirt with. If she married him, it would be a marriage of national importance. The girl thought that this could never in her life be, she therefore said. Please regard this as a mistake made under the influence of drink, and forgive me for my rudeness. The emperor was surprised and asked again why this mistake. He asked if she was definitely not sure she remembered all the events of that night, even though she was drunk. Ellie got embarrassed and said she was a little embarrassed to talk about it. But of course she remembered everything. She hadn't forgotten. And then the girl wondered if she really remembered everything clearly. She'd done a lot of humiliating things while drunk that she should have remembered. but anything could happen. The emperor said he'd never made inquiries, not about her family, her real name, or anything else. And he asked how she thought he could know all this information. Drinking a lot of alcohol really does make a person like an eel. She even took off her hood and hugged him, which caused some trouble. A month to prepare should be enough for her, since the bride has more to worry about. He said they should set the date later, but in the near future. When Ellie got home, it was already night outside. She met Jerry and told him that she had been at the ball quite a while. The maid asked if she had met anyone she liked there. Ellie asked her who she would prefer as, say, a pet, an ignorant, miserable carp, or a wild lion. Jerry said neither, because the lion might kill her, and she didn't want to look after an ignorant, obnoxious carp either. Then the girl asked where her mom was now. Jerry replied that she thought she was looking at family portraits for the first time in a long time. When Ellie finished her bath, she went into her mother's room and asked if she was there now. The Countess told her daughter to come in and asked if she had enjoyed the ball. Ellie said that the ball only confirmed that Count Vegeta is the dregs of the human race. The Countess said she understood that tomorrow morning they would be inundated with letters from home about the Vegeta family. Ellie asked her mother what she was doing here at this late hour. The woman explained that she wanted to look at her daughter's baby portrait. She was sorry they only had portraits of children. She would have to have a decent one before her wedding, the Countess said. Ellie wondered and asked if her mother still believed that a woman was obligated to marry. The woman replied that of course she did, but then she added that times were slowly changing. When she took a horse for a ride without asking as a child, her grandmother spanked the Countess. And now her daughter has earned 3 degrees. Even now there are very few women in high positions, but if the process is accelerated, even one of them will change. Ellie thought about it, and afterward she asked her mother, in that case, would she be able to accomplish much if she became empress? The Countess was very much surprised, and asked if His Highness had announced whom he would marry. But the girl replied that he had not. Then she said that she had heard rumors of his forthcoming marriage, but it was hard to believe in their righteousness. Even if there are women out there who want to marry him, that's a problem, because you'd have to be out of your mind to want to do that. Ellie interrupted her mother and said she wanted to apologize in advance. At that time, the Emperor lay in his bed, listening to the clock and thinking of Ellie. For him, she had always been like the sun, but he thought he couldn't go back to those times again. That night, when Ellie was very drunk, getting into the wagon, she turned to the Emperor and asked if they had definitely agreed that they were getting married, because there was no turning back now. At this point, the guy sighed. Ellie was annoyed by this, and she asked, "Did you really just sigh? The idea of marrying me is so hateful that you're sighing." Rofer said that's not what it was all about. The girl screamed and asked then what his problem was. Ellie asked why he was hesitating. They were just getting married, that's all. Let him find her at the Eucalyptus house. She promises she won't pretend they don't know each other. If he's just flying her status, enough for the two of them. Ellie, those words lying on the bed, wondered which one of them still had enough of him. Well, all of a sudden, and the books ran in, an alarmed Jerry came running in, and asked that the lady wake up because there were people from the imperial palace in the castle, and they had been sent by His Majesty. No matter how much Ellie hates carp or how much she likes the Emperor's face, she must really just have lost her mind. Ellie was walking towards the guests, and one of the men said that His Highness Emperor Rofers would officially marry Lady Eliera Eucalyptus, and as such, the imperial family would cover all the wedding expenses. When he had finished reading, he said that was the end of it. His Majesty wrote the above message in his own hand and ordered it to be delivered. If the girl wished to add anything, he would relay her words to the Emperor. At that moment, the man thought that this girl was His Majesty's chosen bride after all. He knew that from childhood she was famous for her intelligence, but he did not observe many other abilities in her. That was why the man did not understand why he had chosen this girl. Ellie doesn't know the size of the budget, which makes it difficult for her to calculate the expected costs. She asked if he happened to know the average cost of an imperial wedding. She was surprised and asked what she meant. He wasn't quite sure what she meant by unknown. Ellie replied that he had said that the imperial family would cover all the expenses of the wedding. Then the girl asked what kind of things had been brought to the manor. It was unlikely that they would serve her any service after the wedding. The man finally realized what she was talking about and said that these things were all wedding gifts. Ellie said she only needed a wedding dress, They shouldn't exceed the allotted budget for their wedding, so you can't spend more than necessary. When Ellie wanted to say something else, her mother immediately interrupted her and said that it seemed that her daughter was already worried about the wedding. The man at that moment wondered if everything was all right with the family. The Countess said that she was ashamed to admit that she had only now heard this glorious news. So she begs forgiveness for their inappropriate behavior. She said that she would get the full story from her daughter and help her with the necessary preparations. At that moment, the girl thought that her mother must be very angry. One of the guards turned to Countess Eucalyptus and said that her daughter was about to become empress, and therefore His Majesty had personally chosen her bodyguards. From this day forward, these knights will go everywhere with her. Ellie shouted that she was very grateful for His Majesty's attention, but she would request that the bodyguards take up their duties tomorrow. The men were surprised and said that they had been given orders. The girl replied that His Majesty would understand, and that they should tell him that it was her request. Ellie worried that if her mother started questioning her, she couldn't tell her in front of all those knights that she'd proposed to the Emperor when she was drunk. She grabbed him by the collar and proposed marriage. So Ellie asked that they tell His Majesty that she was very pleased with the productive conversation they had that evening. The man said that if she insisted, she would. Ellie thought she needed to deal with a pressing problem first, so the girl began reading the newspaper. In disguise, His Majesty went to town and met a lady there who was suffering for a broken heart. While he was helping her heal her wound, love blossomed between them. The Countess said that it was very romantic. Wished this newspaper had come before the people from the palace. She also said that her father would be back soon after touring their lands, and when he heard the news, he would most likely faint from shock. Mom asked why she hadn't even thought to share it with her right after she got back from the ball. Ellie said that the engagement had happened rather suddenly. In fact, Ellie really had no idea that the Emperor would find a sliver of romance in her humiliating behavior and publish the story as an article. She said that her fiancé was also the Emperor himself, and asked if her mother was angry with her. The Countess was surprised, and asked why she was happy that her daughter was getting married. After that, she said that the wedding was only a month away, and they had a lot of work to do. First of all, they had to make a list of guests to send invitations to. Ellie asked why Mom didn't seem happy. She's marrying the man who has the highest position and the most power in the entire empire. She had always wished that for her. The Countess said that marriages between nobles can be dissolved even if the husband's family is more powerful than them, in which case one only needs to suffer some losses. But on the other hand, they have no choice but to obey the order of the imperial family. She knows the girl is not interested in gossip, but rumors about the current emperor in the newspapers must have reached her, and the story is described as romantic. But if anything in them is untrue, the Countess said she worries about her daughter having a hard time with him, not only as his wife, but also as empress. Ellie thought her mom was right. An imperial marriage was no laughing matter. She couldn't even believe that she had succumbed to the influence of the moment and accepted the fact that she was marrying the emperor. After all, she already knew that he was far from being a fool. Their story is far from the ones described in novels. The girl doesn't know why he used her drunken antics as an excuse to marry her. And yet, even though he is a tyrant, she understands why Mom is concerned. The article embellishes the truth, but Ellie also wants to follow through and marry him. She figured the Emperor wouldn't look down on her just because she was a woman. At any rate, then he would be no better than Fresita.